Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing a Tahm Kench guide for Season 8. So special thanks to Joseph for the very generous donation. You can find access to this Google Doc in the description, and you can also find timestamps if you don't have time to watch the whole thing. You just want to skip around to your favorite parts. That's an option that's available for you. So first off, we're going to go over the abilities, overall strengths and weaknesses of Tahm, recommended runes, items, and then matchups for Tahm. I'm going to sincerely try to do this a bit faster than my other guides, so we'll see. We'll aim for 30 minutes. Let's see if we can do it. Okay, maybe even faster. Who knows? Like, I want to be... It's always a tension with me of trying to be thorough, trying to give great advice, not be one of those all caps, YouTube videos, give real advice. But at the same time, I'm going to try to bring the times down a little bit so it doesn't intimidate new reviewers. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the Kench here. Okay, so Tahm Kench is seeing a lot of play in professional play right now. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is he is extremely mobile. Okay, now some of these will apply to solo queue depending on your elo bracket, and some of them won't. Okay, so he's very mobile in a macro sense. He's not very mobile in a micro sense, so he doesn't have any sort of dashes to help him escape on this, on the screen that he's occupying, but he can rotate around the map really quickly with his ultimate. It's 120 seconds. It's basically like a Twisted Fate ultimate for 2. You can take yourself and another person. And that's primarily why he's used in professional play. That's one of the major reasons, is that he is extremely mobile. And so you can pressure side lanes with your AD carry and then rotate to get back to your team anytime that you want. So he's very good in that sense. It's almost like you get a... It's not as far as teleport, obviously, but it's very similar, like I said, like a Twisted Fate, or it's further than a Rise ult. It's just a very good macro tool to have. Also, if you win a fight, you can rotate directly over to a tower, or you can rotate over to Baron. A lot of different instances with this ult. Now, there's a favorable interaction with the ult, too, for solo queue that could be pretty relevant. If you can't find a good place to use this ult, you can start it and then cancel the channel. It'll go on a 10-second cooldown, and that will immediately trigger Zeke's Convergence. I guess we can talk about it right now. So what Zeke's Convergence says is casting your ultimate near your conduit, so near your partner, grants you both the bonus, okay? And then it gives you this sort of area of effect damage, this 40 damage per second for up to 10 seconds, and it gives your AD carry 50% bonus magic damage. So this is the worst worded item in the entire game. It's very unclear exactly what this does, but pretty much just think of it as it's going to give your AD carry an extra somewhere between 25 to 50 on hit damage. I don't believe crit interacts with this, but I'm not 100% about that. So that's a pretty good value if you think on average, if your AD carry has like 150 AD, a lot of AD carries don't build a ton of AD. This would be really good on someone like Xayah or Jhin, or people like that who are going to have a ton of AD. Just in general, if you're thinking that your AD carry might have 150 AD, kind of in the mid game, you could do the 150 times 0.25, give you 37.5, and then on hit is worth about 25 gold each. They'll give you about 938 stats on your AD carries. That's pretty good, and it's pretty cost efficient by itself too. It's 102% efficient. So getting that extra 980 value would take this to about like 200% cost efficiency or so. Okay, let's see. So 23, what was it, like 986, something like that. No, it would make it like 150% cost efficient. Oops. Yeah, 148% cost efficient. Now, that doesn't include if you stay near the enemy and you're doing this extra 40 damage per second. If you include that as sort of on-hit damage-ish, then that obviously makes it a lot more. But it just depends on how you want to calculate that. So it's a decent item just because you can start your ult, cancel it, it goes on a 10-second cooldown, and then this will activate. And so you can actually trigger this every 45 seconds. So that's another useful interaction with his ult that is okay in solo queue. It does give you some nice stats too. It has armor, magic resist, cooldown reduction, mana. He likes all these things. So that's why he's used in pro play. is primarily his mobility. Now, a good way to use this in solo queue is You call your jungler in. Let me pull up the map real quick. You'll call up your jungler whenever it's about to be up. So call it up, call it out in like 20 seconds. Tell your jungler to come down and just say free kills. And against most lanes bottom, if you can warp in behind them with your jungler, it's almost always a guaranteed kill. Bare minimum flashes. Now, there are some champions where this is not going to be true, where it's harder to kill them, like Ezreal, Tristana, but those aren't being played as much these days. Trist is still pretty popular, but it's an excellent choice against something like a Varus, a Kog'Maw, a Jinx. Twitch can kind of squirrel his way out of it if he goes invisible and you don't have a control ward. But it's really, really good against immobile lanes, which are, it's good against Jhin. Good against a lot of champions like that. So you just call in your jungler, you just say, hey, you know, my ult's about to be up. Just tell him to come in right here. And you can just slip back to like right here if you want to, or you can go into this bush and then just ult on top of them right there. So they will push up. They'll almost always go for your 80 carry. This works, I'd say, a lot. This works like at least once, 90% of the time or more in solo queue, especially at like Platinum and lower. People are not going to really think much of Tahm Kench being missing. They're just going to think that he backed or warded or, you know, is just goofing off somewhere. So that'll let you warp in behind him. And then once you get behind him like that, it's almost always a kill. It's just your 80 carry just has to not die there. But otherwise, it's pretty good. You can even call in your mid laner. So if your jungler just like doesn't understand what's going on, you can still call in the mid laner. Just have the mid laner run down to... Now you need to make sure that Tribush is clear if you do this. So you need to have a control word there. You can run up here with Kench. Say your jungler's just like, whatever, I'm just going to AFK farm. You can have your tell your mid laner to push in. And then rotate down here. And you can usually warp in from about like right here. You can warp in behind him. It's a pretty far distance early on. So you could come in with your mid laner and kill him. Don't run down the river if you're going to do that, because there's almost always something in here is going to be warded. Either like, you know, this might be warded, or this, or like right here. So you really want your mid laner to path over here and then meet him right here. And that's usually the best option. And then you can warp in. Now this is much more likely to be detected because they could still have like a ward, you know, here. The absolute best way to do it is if you have the jungler and they just come up this way. And just like maybe step into this bush. And then just warp in from there. You don't even have to get into the bush. I mean, you could just stay in the lane. But you can also get in the bush, and that's the best way to do it. Unless they're completely crushing you in lane and their support walks over and wards this, then it's highly, highly unlikely they're going to see this. You could even trick them by like leaving this warded, like let them keep a ward here. So that they feel like they're safe. You can kind of next level them. Let them think that they're safe when they're pushing in here, because they're like, oh, well, we've got this warded and we've got this warded, so we're safe. And then you warp in behind them with Tahm Kench. So that's helpful. It is useful to keep in mind also that, you know, you want to make sure you don't get counter ganked by the enemy jungler. So you need to make sure you have good vision. So if you try this strat and like their jungler's here, that could be pretty bad. That's a rare occurrence in solo queue, but you know, waiting to counter gank the Tahm Kench ult specifically, but you know, you want to be aware that that is an option. So you want to try to make sure that you understand where the jungler is when you're going to do that. Okay, so that's really the power of Tahm Kench in solo queue, is you can come in every like 2 minutes and just kill bot lane. You can win games just like that. So he's a pretty good option if you are duo queuing with a mid laner or a jungler. You can get a lot of elo like that. If you have someone who snowballs really hard that gets a lot of kills, you know, it could be something like you know, just pretty much anything that's popular right now. You know, Kha'Zix or Olaf, Skarner, you know, just pretty much any jungler, especially if they have like very heavy damage or crowd control, is going to be in a really good place if they get all these kills bottom. Okay. So that's really powerful. And then like I said before, you know, the way that you'll see it professionally used Tahm Kench professionally used, is you'll see, you know, something. Let me grab this stuff here. All right, let's say that this tower's down, or let's say this tower's down. We'll say that Tahm Kench's on the blue side. And then they're all up here, like A-ramming or something like that. Your mid laner's right here, your AD carry, or their AD carry support and such, just rotate up here. You can be down here just like pushing this up, you know, and push this into here. And then if it looks like they're about to fight, you can just rotate over to like right here and then just Tahm Kench ult and pop in behind him, you know, when your jungler shows up and kill him. So that's what's really nice, is you can just kind of stick with your AD carry, whoever's in a side lane, make it safer for him, push, and then you don't lose any pressure in the mid lane because you're able to warp over there anytime you want. And so that can create a problem there, you know, for the enemy team, because they're not going to really know where to go, where to attack, because Tahm Kench could show up at any time. Because the range is pretty far. It gets further with each level, but 4,500 is pretty far. That's almost bot lane to mid lane. Not quite, but it's close. Okay. So that's pretty much it for Abyssal Voyage. They buffed this recently. So it takes 1.5 seconds for him to get there. But it was something like, I think he can eat people faster once he pops out of it. Oh, let me scroll up here and see. They did something to him fairly recently that helped him out. And he got nerfed in Season 6. Okay, they increase his damage. Oh, here we go, here we go. So you can spit people out in 1 second instead of 2 seconds. Yeah, and then this is what I was thinking of. So now after you warp in there with your R, you can immediately eat somebody to save them and then run away. Whereas there used to be a 1 second delay. So you can just pop up, eat somebody, and run, which is really nice. So yeah, he got a series of pretty good buffs in 720. Like, this doesn't seem like it's a big deal. It's a pretty big deal. Because, like, what sucks is when you eat an ally, you had to wait 2 seconds before you could spit them back out. And sometimes you just need to clear the crowd control, and then they just need to get back out and start doing damage. And so now you can do it in 1 second instead of 2 seconds. Because you'd always have AD carries be like, why did you eat me? Like, I can't spit myself. Why didn't you spit me out faster? It's like, dude, there's an automatic lockout of 2 seconds. Like, I had to eat you. You were dying, and I can't put you back out. So anyways, that fixed that and made it helpful. And then he does a little bit more damage. This isn't usually relevant for support Tahm Kench, but it is helpful. Okay, let's talk about his other abilities really quickly here. Okay, so that's what he's known for. Grayskin's pretty simple. As you take damage, you get this little gray bar, and then once you press E, then it converts a certain percentage of that gray bar to health. So it'll convert, and this is the last thing that you level, so it's almost always just 70% of the gray health damage. So if you take 300 damage, you're going to have 300 gray health, and then it will convert that 300 gray health at a 70% rate into a shield. So it'll be 210 shield. Or if you don't convert it after so long, 2.5 seconds, then it heals you for 25% of the total damage done. So you would heal for 75. Now keep in mind that shield only lasts for 3 seconds and it goes away. So you just have to play Tahm Kench a lot and get used to this, like when should you shield, when should you heal. If you're just taking light damage in lane, trade poke damage, then you should just let it regen. But if there's a potential that you could die, then you want to use the shield. And obviously, like, the tension then becomes, well, how long do you wait? The longer you wait, the bigger the shield you're going to get. But also, once that shield fades away, they might be able to kill you in one shot. So sometimes, you know, there's not a great science for this, but if you're, like, lower than 50%, like, 30%, 20% health, then you should go ahead and pop that shield. Like, don't try to wait until you're under 10% health to pop it, because, you know, one, you might get spiked out. You may not. They might do more damage than you think they'll do, and two, when the shield wears off, someone could snipe you, you know, with some long distance thing like a Gen W, if you're too low on health. So once you start getting around 50%, start considering using that shield. Obviously, the shield has more value if you use it and they bust the entire shield, than if you don't use it and you heal, because, you know, it converts to a shield at a 70% rate, but the heal only converts at a 25% rate. And so if you're taking a lot of damage, it's much better just to use like a little half shield, like a 50% shield, than it is to continue to take damage and then heal up for only 25%. So, you know, it's kind of a tough ability to use. You just have to think about it, you know, carefully and sort of play a lot of games and just understand how much damage you're going to take at different item thresholds to figure it out. But I'd say in general, if you're scared, just go ahead and shield. Okay. His basic attacks do a certain percentage of his maximum health to enemies. So the more health you have, the more damage you're going to do. This isn't going to be that relevant. I mean, it is nice. Stacks up to 3 times for 5.25% health. The biggest thing is once you get 3 stacks, it triggers different abilities for you. So it does do extra damage, which is nice. But the big one is you get a stun for 1.5 seconds off of your Q. So if you have time to land 3 auto attacks and then Q, you're going to get a really nice stun in there. So if at all possible in a team fight, you want to try to do this so that you get the stun. Sometimes you might have to Q somebody first, because if you auto attack and then Q and then auto, you'll get 3 stacks faster, and that'll allow you to devour somebody if you want to use that offensively faster. But, you know, the most CC you can possibly get is just auto attack 3 times, stun them for 1.5 seconds, and then eat them. And that's the maximum amount of CC you can get. So it's a pretty good ability for only 50 mana. It starts to do quite a bit of damage. It does up to 280 damage with a 0.7 ratio, so that's nice. And it has a 70% slow that doesn't decay. It's the full 70% over 2 seconds. That's a really big slow. This doesn't come up all the time. But you can tongue lash and then devour. So as your Q's in the air, if you press W, it'll snap up a minion and bring it into your mouth, and then you can spit it out. So you get a free devour. It doesn't cost mana, but it does use both cooldowns. So this is helpful if, you know, your ally's not going to be able to get to a cannon minion or something, and you have a, you know, a stack on your Eye of the Aspect or whatever. You can snap it up with your Q and then spit it to him. This is also nice if you're trying to like grab the scuttle, if like the enemy jungler is trying to get the scuttle and you want to grab it from a distance, either to kill it or reposition it so that your team can kill it. That's pretty helpful. So you can't snap up enemies or allies by tongue lashing them and then Wing. I think that would be really cool. That might make him overpowered if you could do that. So you can only do it on minions and non-epic monsters. Like you can't do it on Baron or something like that. But it's a pretty useful ability. So overall, really effective. You definitely want to get 3 points of this in lane. It's pretty decent harassment. And it scales really well. You know, you get 50 per point that you put in it. 50 extra damage. So that's pretty good. I would get 3 points in lane and then start maxing Devour after that, because getting the cooldown lower on Devour is really, really important, because this is your major defensive tool that you have, and it also does a ton of damage. Some people get up to 4 points in Q. If the laning phase lasts for a really long time, you can get additional points in Q before you switch over to W. But once those towers go down in the bot lane, you really need to have your W ready, because poking is not going to be as important later on with this tongue lash. So, okay, Devour, this is probably his most iconic thing. The way you should use this most of the time is you need to devour your allies who are in trouble. That's the best way to use this. So if you're not sure if you should go offensive or defensive with it, just err on the side of going defense. So you're primarily picking Tahm Kench. I didn't talk about his place in the meta that much. I guess I could go ahead and do that real quickly. Tahm Kench is a counter pick type of champion a lot of the time. So in solo queue, you want to pick him specifically to counter crowd control on the enemy team. So you want to pick him to counter like a Leona, a Thresh, a Morgana, Ashe, Sejuani, Skarner, Malzahar, anybody that, you know, has a ton of crowd control. Tahm Kench is going to be a pretty good option for that. He basically is like a Quicksilver Sash for your allies. He can eat them, get them out of any kind of crowd control they're in, and then he blocks a degree of damage too. Anything that's not already applied to the person as a damage over time, he will block. So he absorbs all of the damage when he eats them. Now, if they have an Ignite ticking on them, or they have Malzahar's Malefic Visions ticking on them, or they have the Zed ult has already landed on them and is ticking on them, then that's going to go off and kill them anyways when they're in your stomach. So it doesn't make them immune to all of that stuff. It's kind of like an Elise, you know, where she goes up in the air, and maybe even like a Vladimir pool or something like that. You can still die to damage over time when you're in these untargetable states. So it's the same thing when you eat an ally to Tahm Kench. Now, if they are targeting them with something that you can eat, like, there are some weird corner cases. Like, if a Fizz ult hits somebody and you eat them, I believe that you will take the damage for that instead. Because the fish doesn't go inside you. It's not a damage over time. It's just whoever is around the fish, when it goes up, takes the damage. And you will block that damage for them. Also, if Zed is in the air trying to apply his dot, and you eat them before he reappears, then the dot will go on you instead of them. So if you're close enough, when Zed tries to ult somebody, you can eat them and prevent that, I believe. However, if it's already on him, if he's already reappeared, then they're going to take the damage. You know, you could block, I believe you can block Karthus damage if you eat him. So anything that would apply damage to somebody that's not a damage over time, he blocks a lot of that. So it's weird. It's a really weird interaction. Like, you just have to play a lot of games and see a lot of interactions with champions. But primarily you'll use it to get people out of a Thresh hook, get people out of a Leona ultimate, get people out of an Ashe arrow, a Varus ult, that type of stuff. So, you know, I wouldn't always recommend playing him first pick unless that stuff is just super popular in the meta, which Leona is becoming more popular. But the problem is that he has tough matchups against Janna and Lulu, specifically in solo queue, and Soraka, against enchanters in general. We'll talk about why a little bit more later, but that's why I wouldn't recommend blind picking him. But he is a good counter pick against that stuff. And this is why. It's because the W gets people out of crowd control. Other uses of this, the second most used mode of this probably is to use it offensively. So you can eat somebody and it does a lot of damage. Yeah, the Regurgitate, it does up to 32% of their max health. That's right, 32% max health when he eats somebody. So he can surprisingly 1v1 a lot of champions if you try to fight him, especially 80 carries. So, you know, later on, or just like any sort of squishy champion. A good combo if you're trying to eat somebody pretty quickly later on is just Tongue Lash, auto, eat them with the W. Hold them in your mouth for as long as you can. And the reason for that is it's going to allow your Tongue Lash to come back off cooldown when you spit them out. So you can hold them in your mouth for like... It's reduced against enemies. So you can hold them in your mouth for like 3 seconds. Up to 3 seconds. And that's going to allow your Tongue Lash to come off cooldown. Especially once you have some cooldown reduction. You get that Tongue Lash cooldown to like 4 seconds. So if you Tongue Lash, auto, eat them, it should be up about right when you spit them out. And then as soon as you spit them out, you Tongue Lash them again. It'll slow them. You can land a couple more autos. And then just walk them down. And then as soon as your Q's off cooldown again, Tongue Lash them again. It'll stun them for a second and a half. Eat them a second time if you have to, and then they're dead. Most of the time. So he can 1v1 a lot of champions later on in the game, even with no damage items whatsoever. So he's deceptively very powerful. Especially against like tank champions. So if you eat somebody like an Olaf, or you can eat Olaf if he's ulting. Thank you, dear. Look at that. That's a properly portioned ketchup amount.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, dear. So, yeah, so he can do a surprising amount of 1v1 damage. Now, the temptation in fights, though, is, well, I want to go aggressive. I want to go eat their 80 carry. I want to go eat, you know, this bruiser that's messing with our mid laner or something like that. It's like, I want to eat the Jax or something. It's like, you can do that, but it's very dangerous because your primary job, like the reason you're picking Tahm Kench is to protect key targets on your team, usually the 80 carry. So if you're running off... You know, if we look at the map here, let's say the team fight breaking out mid lane. Let's get everybody on their proper sides here. Alright, here we go. Okay, so let's say, you know, you've got your 80 carry here, you got your support here, you got your mid laner here poking, your jungler's up here, like, trying to tank. Their jungler... Their mid laner, their 80 carry, their support. Now, let's say you have an option. Let's say their support is something like like an Alistar, something they're fighting here. So if as a support you're like, oh, you know, there's their Jax or whatever, I want to go over here and tongue lash this guy, and then Alistar comes up and engages on your AD carry, and then their AD carry kills yours, and then like maybe you kill it, even if you kill the jungler, you're probably going to be at a pretty big disadvantage because you just lost a lot of your damage with your AD carry. So it just depends. I mean, if your AD carry is kind of worthless, like if they're not doing well, if they're like 0-7 or something, maybe it is a better idea to try to kill that 7-0 Jax to help with that. So, you know, there's not always a steadfast rule for this, but just keep in mind that if you're going up and trying to use it offensively, then you can't use it defensively to save your ally. Whereas a lot of times you would want to wait until that Alistar comes in, eat your ally, reposition them, and then work from there. So most of the time you want to save it to eat allies. However, you can get aggressive if you're already winning the fight, or sometimes if they have something that's really mobile, that's not doing like a ton of immediate damage, that is going to run you down anyways. So maybe if there's like a Sejuani in your AD carry's face, they don't ulta, maybe they don't have ult, but you can tongue lash, auto, and then eat them. That could be a better option than, you know, just eating the AD carry, because if you eat the AD carry, like if this tower's down or something, if you're just out fighting in the middle of the lane, if you eat the AD carry here, and then like maybe come over here and spit them out, like Sejuani's just going to follow you and stick on you the whole time. Then as soon as you spit him out, then she's going to start fighting him. So sometimes it could be better just to go ahead, especially against like low burst damage tanks, that you can just eat them and then carry them like over here and spit them out away from your AD carry. So, you know, like I said, there's not an exact science there, but in general, you should favor saving allies, going aggressive against the enemy, specifically if you need more damage, or if your AD carry is kind of a turkey and you just want to help other allies by contributing some damage. And the third way, which is very rare that you could do this, but you can actually eat an ally and then run at the enemy if you're chasing people. So let's say that you've won this fight in the mid lane, and now, you know, let's say that the mid laner's dead, AD carry's dead, and now the jungler and support are just trying to run away. You could actually come up, if you guys are right here when the fight ends, you could come up, eat the jungler, and then just run at him, and then spit the jungler out here. Because if you eat somebody, you get a movement speed boost when you're running towards enemies of 25%. While moving towards enemy champions. Now, you don't get that movement speed when you're running away. He used to have that initially. He used to get this huge movement speed after he hit somebody, and he could run away with it. That was ridiculous. But now it's only when you're running near enemy champions. So you can use this to help engage if you want to. I would only use this, though, if the fight is already broken, if you've already won, and you're just trying to chase down, like, maybe one more kill, make sure that jungler's dead so that you can do Baron, or something like that. So, you know, just a quick recap of Devour. Use it on allies most of the time. Watch for the crowd control. Once they get crowd control, go ahead and use it. And then you would want to use your auto attacks and your Q primarily to peel people away. Otherwise, if you really need the damage, if your AD carry is already in a safe position, if you just really need to crack those tanks, if they just have that, you know, Cho'Gath that has 4,000 health, or, you know, something like that, and you need this extra damage on your team, you can regurgitate them. Usually you want to hold them to spit them out, then spit them out and tongue lash them. You can also spit them out on things that are important. So you always want to ping where you're going to spit them out so that allies know where to aim. So like Caitlyn can set down a trap. You can spit them out on that. You can spit them out on Jinx chompers. If someone, like, you could have Jinx like shoot a rocket, and then as soon as the rocket's about to land, you spit them out like right on top of the rocket, or on top of the Ashe arrow, or the Ezreal ult, or whatever. So if you ping where you're going to spit it out, or like Victor can drop his little, you know, field down, just so that people can use all of their skill shots and their like zone stuff where you're going to spit the person out. So there's a lot of combos with Tahm Kench. Like Jen can W them when you spit them out if you point where it's going to be. So there's a lot of uses, but once again, that's going to take really good communication to make that happen. How are we looking here on time? Oh, we're basically at time. Okay, so we got to speed up a little bit. But yeah. That's how you use Tahm Kench's abilities pretty effectively. So his strengths, he's great versus enemy crowd control. He has excellent rotations, very high single target damage. If you want to use it that way, remember you shouldn't use it that way to support Tahm Kench a lot, but it is possible. You know, a good time when you might use that is in lane if like Leona tries to go in. So a good example of this, like Leona tries to go in and engage on your team down in the bot lane, and then you eat your AD carry out of that, and then you can go aggressive. Then you can start auto-attacking, Q her to stun her, and then if she doesn't flash, once your Devour comes back up, you can eat her, and then she's pretty much dead. So if like Thresh or Leona or somebody else engages onto you, after you Devour to save somebody, and then you turn the fight around with your auto-attacks and your Q, then you can use your Devour offensively. If you ever get 2 stacks on somebody, so if you ever Q somebody and then auto-attack them, you know, a lot of times they'll try to flash, and you can flash after them, then auto-attack them one more time and eat them, and they're probably dead. If you ever eat somebody in the laning phase, most of the time they're going to die, because it's just a huge amount of damage, and you pull them so far back into your team, it's basically like you're taking the flash away from them, that they're probably going to die. So you can do an alarming amount of damage if people don't respect it in lane. So that would be another good place to use the damage. His weakness, he has low mobility, especially on ganks. Now, he kind of offsets that by being very tanky, and we'll talk about with the runes. You'll want to take Cleanse in the mid game, and this makes him a lot better. But, yeah, he has low micro mobility. I call it micro mobility because he has high mobility macro on the map. He can rotate with his ult, but on screen he has very low mobility. Another trick you can do is if you eat your ally, you can flash with your ally in your mouth. So, you know, if you're both getting ganked and it's like you're getting completely flanked by like a Shaco or something and both of you are going to die, you can eat your ally if it's like a Jinx or something and then flash, and then that way they don't have to use their flash. You can just use your flash to get 2 people out. You can also jump over walls with this. This will troll the crap out of people. This is pretty funny, though. Like, let's say that you're trying to rotate or something through the river here, and then, you know, the enemies all come in to surround you. And then you're with your AD carry right here. You can just, like, ping over here, run into here, and then just, like, eat your AD carry and then just flash over the wall with them. Or, like, this has happened before, too, where, like, your mid laner's running away from the jungle or something, and then you just like run over here, meet him in the jungle, and then just flash over this wall with him. And that will really tilt some people. It's pretty funny. But anyways, not that. How do I can't remember. There's like a clear all button. Okay, reset everything. There we go. But anyway, so he does have low mobility. He can get caught out. But he is very tanky, and if you take Cleanse, and sometimes people even take Quicksilver Sash on him, then it does fix a lot of those problems. Okay, low presence in the laning phase. I just said you can kill them if they go on you, but if they don't engage onto you, it's really hard to engage onto them as Tahm Kench. You're kind of just hoping that they get close enough where you can Tongue Lash auto. There are some builds we'll talk about here in a second where you can get Glacial Augment and potentially be able to stick on people more and get more aggressive in lane. But by and large, I think that's a lot less effective than going Unsealed Spellbook. We'll talk about that here in just a second, though. The other drawback is it requires really good team coordination to maximize his kit, and we've talked about this several times. So you need to have somebody actually come down so you can take your Abyssal Voyage. I mean, you can use it yourself to warp behind the enemy, but a lot of times that's not going to be as effective. So you really need the jungler mid laner to come with you to make sure that you get those kills. So you have to communicate that. People have to actually listen to you to make that really effective. The other thing is when you eat your ally, they can spit themselves back out. So if they just click anywhere after you eat them, it's going to spit them out. So this will happen quite a lot, and it'll really annoy you, especially the lower you go in Elo, where you know, you eat somebody to try to save them, and they were clearly going to die, and then they will spit themselves right back out into the danger, and then they'll die. And then they'll blame you. They'll say, dude, I had that. Why did you eat me? So, you know, that can definitely be a thing that happens where people don't understand the limits of their champion. So when you save them, you know, they think that they could have won the fight, and then they'll be angry at you for that. Or they could just accidentally press it. So maybe you save them, and maybe they're like, whoa, thanks, man. And then they just randomly click all over the place on their mouse, then they spit themselves right back out and die. So that happens a lot more than you're going to want when you play games. I'd say that probably happens at least 25% of the time or more where somebody spits himself out early. Maybe not necessarily to death, but it could make the situation a lot sketchier if they spit themselves out. So that's problematic. Yeah, and then like the tongue lag, I mean, that's pretty much the communication stuff. It's just coordinating the Devour correctly and then coordinating the Abyssal Voyage correctly. The other stuff doesn't require a lot of communication, but those are the key linchpins to your whole kit, right? Is saving people with your Devour and rotating with your Abyssal Voyage. So if the enemy team doesn't know a lot about Tahm Kench or they don't really they're not on board with what you're trying to do, that can be a problem. More so than almost any other champion in the game, with the exception of maybe like Thresh, if people don't take your Lantern or don't follow up your hooks. And that's what makes him hard to play, is you have to have good communication, you have to have really good sort of macro knowledge, when should you rotate, and then good decision making. When should you eat an ally, when should you eat an enemy? So his kit is not very micro intensive, right? Like there's not a lot of skill shots to him. You know, yeah, it's nice if you land the tongue lashes and stuff like that, but it is a lot of decision making and coordination with your team, so that can make him challenging to play, and that's why historically he's had a pretty low win rate. Now, Champion.gg has been a little squirrely lately. In the support role, I think it just doesn't know how to calculate support from junglers sometimes. But even if we, you know, take away kind of these goofy top 3 picks here, he's still going to be pretty low down the totem pole. Yeah, he's at like a 48% win rate, so not super low, but he's virtually never going to be over a 50% win rate, similar to Thresh, because it just requires a lot of coordination and game knowledge for people. So anyways, let's go ahead and move on to items here, or runes, and then we'll do items. So Unsealed Spellbook, this is the main thing that you want to take. Now, I've gone kind of back and forth on this. I used to take Guardian on him, but as I've been watching some more pro play lately and just thinking more critically about it, it is pretty important to take Unsealed Spellbook. Yeah, Clarity's been removed. Okay, so it gives you... Cleanse is only on a 210-second cooldown, so it's a fairly low cooldown. It removes all disables except for Suppression and Airborne. And it gives you 65% Tenacity for 3 seconds. Now, I think this stacks additively with Mercury Treads. I'm not sure. But what that means is that for 3 seconds, Crowd Control is only going to have 1/3 of its normal effect on you. So if you would be stunned for 3 seconds after you use Cleanse, you would only be stunned for 1 second. So it virtually makes you immune to crowd control, most crowd controls, for 3 seconds, and it removes the current one that affects you. So this is super important on Tahm Kench, and a lot of the reason for that is if you die, 2 people are going to die usually. It's not just you, it's other people, because a lot of times you'll eat them, and then they'll try to crowd control or deal with you. And so you have to have that cleanse so that you can eat somebody, remove the crowd control off of you, and then run away. Because that's how a lot of people think to counter Tahm Kench. So like, oh, well, if I just wait until, you know, Tahm Kench devours somebody, so if I hook somebody as Thresh, Tahm Kench eats them, then I take the hook, flay him backwards, and ult him, then we can still kill him because Tahm Kench is going to be slowed by the flay in the box. And then once we kill him, then we can kill the AD carry after it pops out of him. Well, Cleanse makes that really hard to happen, especially with Summoner Spellbook, because that's going to lower the cooldown by quite a bit. And that allows you to take something like Ignite for the laning phase so that you don't give up all of your pressure. And then in the mid-game, once team fights are happening a lot more, then you can get Cleanse. So Cleanse is really, really good on Tahm Kench. This is part of the reason why people on Rakan will also get Cleanse, because Rakan is very vulnerable to crowd control as well. So that's the primary reason that people take Unsealed Spellbook these days, is so they can run Cleanse in the mid-game. You know, another option is Glacial Augment. This does slow people when you auto-attack them. So the thing you can do here is, you know, as soon as you Q somebody, then you can flash on them, start auto-attacking with Glacial Augment. Then even if they flash away, you're still going to catch them because they're going to be slowed so much. And then you can eat them and spit them out, and that's going to kill them. So that's a lot more aggressive, but it's a lot more dangerous as well. In theory, you could also take Teleport if you needed to. But I think that Unsealed Spellbook is the way to go, and specifically because you have the ability to get that cleanse in the mid game, which is really nice. And then I recommend for most people doing Magical Footwear. This is good, guaranteed money, guaranteed value. It's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 375 gold value. You get the 300 for the boost, you get 10 bonus movement speed. So that's pretty solid. You can take Perfect Timing if you want. I honestly don't know how this interacts if someone's in your mouth and you use Perfect Timing. I've never seen that happen. I would assume they would stay in your mouth until after it wears off. But the problem with this is it takes like 10 minutes now for this to become active, and it doesn't build into anything useful that you're going to get. So you're not going to be getting Guardian's Angel or Gargoyle Stoneplate or anything like that on Tahm Kench. So it's kind of a waste of gold. So it is useful, and it also requires a lot of skill to know when you should use this and when you shouldn't use it. Because I would say, especially at like Platinum and lower, people are going to just waste this like over half the time. They'll just use Perfect Timing, then they'll die at the end anyways. So that's on the weak side. So yeah, I'd probably go for Magical Footwear. Biscuit Delivery System, I think, should be the standard. You can go Dematerializer if you're scared of like bannered up minions, but in normal solo queue play, you know, under Diamond, that's not going to be an issue. So I would probably just go for the guaranteed value, the sustain of Biscuit Delivery. All three of these are pretty good on Kench. I think most people go for Cosmic Insight. You know, having another 5% on your summoner cooldown kind of doubles down on Cleanse being strong. This also helps you with CDR, which is very helpful on Tahm, because usually you can't get Ionian Boots, and you have to get a Locket pretty quickly. So it's hard to get much more than like, you know, 15 or 20% CDR on Tahm, and he loves CDR, because that's going to give you, you know, just more Ws, more W uptime, which is really powerful. So, you know, Cosmic Insight's probably the way to go. Also, it does affect item actives, which is really nice if you're going to get Locket and Knight's Vow, which usually you are. So this is just all around a really solid value. I mean, if we want to think of, it's hard to value the stat, but like, I'm pretty sure that cooldown reduction is valued at 26 gold apiece times 5. That's 130. So there's not really a good way to value item actives and summoner cooldown actives, I don't think. But it's probably somewhere around where cooldown reduction would be. So if you're getting 3 of those, then that's about a 390 gold value. So that's a pretty good value because you use all 3 of those stats really well. Approach Velocity is a really good combo if you're taking Glacial Augment. This is going to allow you to run faster towards somebody that you just slowed with your Q. So this is if you want to go, you know, aggressive Tahm Kench and try to get those kills in lane. That could be a useful tool. Time Warp Tonic, if you're in a really hard lane, like you're against a Zyra or a Karma or just something else that's going to be poking you a lot, that is an option. You can go Biscuit Time Warp. As your secondary, you almost always want to go Resolve because you want that health. And Bone Plating is a must. That's just a great defensive tool. And then here, all of these are potentially pretty good. Chrysalis is not as good on him because he doesn't use ability power that well. He does have a decent ratio on his Q, but it's not really that great. So you'd want one of these. Once again, in a tough lane, you probably want Second Wind. It's going to give you a lot more sustain. But Conditioning is what a lot of people get because that's a really solid value, especially because you're going to be stacking a decent chunk of armor and magic resist as the game goes on. So if you think, you know, at 10 minutes, even if you're only going to have, like, let's say 12 bonus armor and magic resist early on, if you look at 12 armor, that's 12 times 20 is 240 value, and then that's about a 456 gold value, and that's if you don't have many resistances at all early on. So that's obviously anything that's like over 350 gold value is really strong on a non-keystone rune. So that's a really good gold value on someone like Tahm Kench, who really highly values armor and magic resist, because it not only applies the first time when you lose your health, but it also applies to your gray health shield that you make. So it's almost like you get double the value out of armor and magic resist. So that's really good. And I wouldn't really go anywhere else. I mean, you can do an option like I used to do where you go Guardian early, like Guardian, Bone Plating, Conditioning, Unflinching for that tenacity, and then you can go over and get like Zombie Warden and Genius Hunter. This is what I used to do. This is great if you want to get like Locket, like a Locket Redemption build. But a lot of people are going away from that because they just want to be as tanky as possible. And you know, they really want that cleanse. It's kind of been the new tech that people have been running lately with Unsealed Spellbook, and I think that's a really good move. So that's what I would currently recommend on Tahm Kench. So yeah, just to recap, Unsealed, cleanse is huge in the mid game. Best bargain and slot on footwear. Very reliable. You can't mess it up. Like, you could mess up Hourglass though, so or Stopwatch. So I would probably just err on the side of footwear. Biscuits are good sustain. Cosmic Insight, really solid value, about 390 gold, like we talked about. Bone Plating, obvious, really strong. And then Conditioning, I would probably take most of the time over Second Wind. As far as items go, a lot of different items you can get for Tahm Kench. So Eye of the Aspect is mandatory. You have to take that. You can't afford to take something like Coin. You really, really need that health, because that's going to give you more gray health. It's going to give you better scaling with Locket, and that's going to give you more damage on your passive. So you just really, really want a lot of health on Tahm Kench. Your boots are optional, but you need defensive boots. So you do not want to go something like mobility boots. You're not a ganker. You're a defensive peeler support, so you don't need mobility boots. Boots of Swiftness are nice if they, if they have a lot of slows. That might be an option. It does give you a lot of extra movement speed, but it's going to make you a lot squishier. I mean, the value on something like Ninja Tabby is just astronomical. So if we think of, I think Tabi gives, I'm pretty sure it gives 30 armor. That's 600 gold worth of defensive stats that you're giving up. If you go for, yeah, that's, let me see. Yeah, it's 30 armor. So that's 600 gold worth of 600 gold worth of armor that you're giving up for basically 10 move speed. And don't forget, it also blocks 10% of basic attack damage, which is insane. That's a lot of extra damage. So I would say that passive there, that 10% passive, is way more valuable. Then this reduces the effectiveness of slows by 25%. So Ninja Tabi should be your standard boot. Yeah, it's only 200. It is 200 more gold, but remember, you're getting that 600 value off the armor, and the passive is way more valuable on this than it is on Boots of Swiftness most of the time. Boots of Lucidity are really nice. You are getting the 10% summoner cooldown and 10% CDR off of it. I think it's CDR, right? Yeah, it just didn't say it in the tooltip. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, there's the 10% CDR. I was like, am I crazy? Okay, so this one is cheaper. It's only 900, which is really nice. And then, you know, once again, you're getting like the 266 times 2. You know, you're getting like a 532 value, you know, rough estimate there, value by having that. And this would make your cleanse a lot more available, which is great. But once again, Ninja Tabi is going to be 600 value, and it's going to have a passive that's massively useful. So this is really for enchanters, team fighting enchanters. I would not favor this on Tahm Kench. It's pretty good. Now, Mercury Treads are another one that's pretty good. I mean, the magic resist is pretty legit. 25 times 18. Not quite as much as 450 instead of a 600 gold value. But that tenacity, that 30% reduction in crowd control, I'm not sure how that works with cleanse. I mean, let me just look at the stat. I think it stacks multiply. It's a stat that changes depending on what the situation is. Okay, so these grant tenacity, tooth and nail, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we go.
It's
stacking. These items stack additively with tenacity. Elixir travels. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Mercury treads with Steric's Gauge. Okay, so those stack tenacity. Okay, and then everything else stacks multiplicatively. Okay, so if it's not Mercury treads with Steric, so certain things, that's a really wonky stat. Okay, Unflinching stacks additively with Elixir of Iron. Mercury stacks additively with Steric's. So most other stuff stacks multiplicatively. So they do an example here. Or that reduces stack. So what that means is basically, so let's say that something is going to crowd control you for 1 second. if you have Mercury Treads, which is 30% tenacity, then by itself, then it's only going to crowd control you for 0.7 because you're going to reduce it by 30%. Okay, simple enough. But what if you have Cleanse, for example, which reduces it by 65%? Well, it's not going to reduce it by 95%, okay? So it's not only going to be a 0.05. So the reason they do that is they don't want people to be completely immune to crowd control. Like, that's the goal. So how this would work is you would stack multiplicatively. So you would do the 30% off the original, so that's the 0.7, okay? So that is Mercury Treads reducing the 1 second cooldown, takes it down to a 0.7 seconds. And then you multiply it times 0.35 because we're removing 65% of that duration off of Cleanse. That means there's only 0.35 remaining. So it's going to reduce it to 0.245 seconds worth of crowd control. So it's not 0.05. That would be if it's stacked additively. If you had the 65 plus 30%, 95% reduction, this is going to end up being a 75.5% reduction. Even though it's 65% on one hand and it's 30% on the other hand, it's still only going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% total reduction. So there are a lot of diminishing returns if you have Cleanse and Mercury Treads. But it's still something that you'll want to get if they have a lot of AP. And then, of course, your Cleanse is not always going to be off cooldown if you take Cleanse. So that's something to keep in mind there. Knight's Vow, you almost always get Knight's Vow. The reason is this has HP, it has armor, it has a great passive that helps protect you and your AD carry. It gives you the lifesteal basically off of your AD carry's damage, and it gives your AD carry reduction, and it's cheap. So it's just a really nice, affordable item, and you need something else with health on it because you have Locket. And Locket scales off of how much health you have. So you want at least 2 health items before you get Locket. So you have Eye of the Aspect, that's 1 health item. Knight's Vow is the second one. And then Locket, everyone knows Locket. Great defensive item. Gives you some okay defensive stats, and then has a really big shield for team fighting. So Knight's Vow, Locket, that's almost always going to be your bread and butter. That's what you'll almost always get as Tahm Kench. Another option would be Quicksilver Sash. If you're against a lot of crowd control, or if you're against a suppression, you can do a Quicksilver Sash. There are some pros building that. If we kind of look at what pros are building here on Tahm Kench in recent memory, you do see some of them getting a Quicksilver Sash. This used to never happen, but a lot more Toms are running this. I've seen this in some pro play lately as well. So you're not going to get it every game. But if they have something like a Malzahar or a Skarner or a Warwick. So yeah, he's getting it here because they have a Malzahar and a Skarner. So that's why he got it. So it's very situational. But that is an option that's on the table. If you're against a ton of crowd control and you're afraid that Cleanse is not really going to be able to do it. As you can see, the jury's kind of out. Like, some people will go Glacial Augment in certain lanes. Some people go Unsealed Spellbook. Very few people still do Guardian. That used to be the standard on him, but it's not as good these days. So, like I said, I really like the Spellbook version. But if you want to get aggressive in lane, you know, you can do the Glacial Augment version. You'll see pretty much everybody's going to have Locket. Most people are also going to have Knight's Vow with that. And there's a sprinkling of other things. You know, Banner of Command is something that's useful if you want to split push side lanes, generate a little bit of extra cash. That's a pretty good value. I mean, I guess you can rush it. It just depends. If your team is losing and you need side lane pressure, or if they have a really good siege defense, like they have an Anivia or something like that, you might need Banner to help you push out side lanes. I talk about this in my macro video that I just released a little bit ago, like rotations and macro. So be sure to check that out if you want to know more about. And I have an entire video about Banner of Command, actually. Look on my channel. It'll talk all about Banner of Command, why it's useful. And I made that video like 2 months before it became really popular. Banner did, after they changed around the Baron. So it's not as impressive as it was for that one patch. I think it was like 8.4, but it's still really good. And then you don't see a lot of people getting Zeeks, like I mentioned before. It's not going to be as good as Knight's Vow and Locket in a lot of games, but it is an option that's on the table if you need for it to be an option. So yeah, some people are messing around with Shirelias. I don't like Shirelias. It's cute if you eat somebody to be able to run away, but the problem is he doesn't use the ability power that much. So it's kind of like, you know, almost 1,000 gold of wasted stats there. And it just really doesn't have any defense on it. Doesn't have armor, doesn't have magic resist. So it's iffy. There are some people, you'll notice, they will get redemption if they already have... typically, it's if they already have Knight's Vow and Locket. But some people get redemption a little bit earlier. It's okay. You don't need the mana regen. You're going to be really squishy if you get that. But it will give you some superior team fight capabilities. So yeah, he's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of flexibility in his build. So it's pretty much going to be Knight's Vow Locket every game for you, with upgraded boots and Eye of the Aspect and control wards. And that's what you're going to see, you know, in 90% of your games probably. Although, like I said, Banner could be useful situationally, Zeke's could be useful situationally, and I guess Redemption could be useful, but I wouldn't recommend Redemption most of the time unless you already have Locket, and then you're doubling down on your team fight capabilities. You obviously don't really benefit that heavily from plus healing and shielding either. It does affect your Grayskin shield, but you'd rather just be tankier most of the time. Because your primary goal is just protect your single target. Like, rotate, make plays, protect your target that you're built to protect. That's why you're picking Tahm Kench. So that's why things like Knight's Vow, you know, make perfect sense on him. Okay, matchups. So he's going to be best against anyone who has a lot of crowd control. That has pretty long cooldowns. So, like, Thresh, especially, like, close-range champions. Thresh, Leona, Morgana, Skarner, Sejuani. Obviously, Morgana's not close range, but if you can remove her bind, that takes a lot of power out of her kit. So, yeah, and these are all, that's very common, right? They all have a pretty long cooldown, very heavy, dangerous CC. So, Thresh, Leona, Morg, Skarner, and Sejuani. He's best with people who have long range, so that when you eat somebody and you spit them out on the back line in safety, they can still do something. So Jhin historically is the best option for this. Because if you save somebody from a dive with Jhin, you can go back, spit them out, and then he can ult, he can use his W, he can use grenades from a distance. So Jhin is classically the best option. Also, if you do manage to eat somebody in lane, Jhin can drop a trap, you can spit them out on top of the trap, then he can W them, then the trap's going to blow up on him. So they have a lot of synergy together, Jhin with Tahm. And he has really high sort of like burst / sustained damage. There aren't certain windows where he has to have an ability active to do a lot of damage. So this is why you don't see Tahm, like, Tahm is okay with champions like Kog'Maw, Twitch, or Tristana, but the issue with that is they have certain windows of power where they have to do their maximum DPS whenever they turn on whatever their ability is. Whenever Twitch turns on his ult for 5 seconds, when Tristana activates her Q, when Kog activates his W. So they really just want to stand there and fire. And if you're eating them, if you have to eat them and then carry them back and spit them out, they're losing efficiency off of those abilities. So, you know, he can be good with those champions, but it also is going to really take away quite a bit from their DPS if you do that. Versus someone like Jhin, Caitlyn, or Varus, you know, they pretty much are always at their maximum uptime. So yeah, Kate is another one who's pretty good. Now, he can't really, like, push as well with Kate. Like, he can eat minions and spit them out to push if he has to, but that's really dangerous if you get ganked. But she can lay down traps, and he can spit people out right on the traps. So, and that adds up to quite a bit of damage. So, he's pretty decent with Caitlyn. I think he's a lot better with Jhin. Varus is another one that's pretty good because he's immobile. He doesn't have a lot of escapes. Tahm Kench helps fix that. And then Varus will keep his uptime even after you eat him. And he has pretty long range. He's 575 range. So Varus is a pretty good combo with Tahm Kench as well. And these are also, like, pretty long-range lane-dominant champions, so you're not going to get completely pounded in lane. Because Tahm Kench is not great in the laning phase most of the time, unless you're all in and killing people with, like, flashing and glacial augment. Because he doesn't have, I mean, he has his Q for poke, but it's just not really that substantial. So you can really get bullied out hard if you try to pick Tahm with, like, a Vayne or something like that. Someone who's low range, low pressure, early game. If you're against something like a Draven and, like, a Lulu, or just something like Sona, something that pokes really hard, that could be a major issue early on. So you want to pick him with long-range, lane-dominant champions if you're going to play him most of the time, just so that you don't have two weak-lane champions. Okay, his worst matchups are going to be high-scaling enchanters and high-scaling AD carries. The reason is he can't really get on them. Like, unless you manage to warp behind him with your ultimate, you really don't have a way to interact with Twitch or Kog'Maw in the late game. So what that basically comes down to is does your AD carry have more steroids? Are they going to do more damage, or does their AD carry have more damage? Because it doesn't matter if you eat to save somebody, you know, if they don't have a lot of crowd control and they have like a 4-item Kog'Maw with a Lulu buffing him up, you can't do anything about that. You're just going to watch that Kog'Maw delete your team. So you have no engage and you have no steroids for your AD carry. And so if it gets to a shoot-off and they have more buffs than you, you know, if it's that Lulu who puts her W on Cog and she has Ardent Sensor, they're going to blow you away. And so you need to make sure that you have the higher scaling AD carry. Now, if they have Lulu and Ezreal or something, and you have, you know, like Jinx plus Tahm Kench, then it might still be okay to have Tahm Kench against Lulu because you have the much higher scaling AD carry. And Lulu, similarly, is not going to be able to get your AD carry. So it basically just comes down to, and this happens with a lot of peelers, it comes down to, okay, well, I can protect my AD carry. You're not going to get to them, but I also can't get to your AD carry. So it just comes down to, well, who is going to be able to just do more damage when they just stand there and fire? And so you want to make sure that you have the AD carry that does all the damage. Okay, so you do not want to pick him also with champions that aren't going to scale that well. Right now, Jhin doesn't scale super well, but he has so many synergies with Tahm Kench that it's pretty good. Caitlyn similarly can have problems, but she has those synergies. And then Varus scales pretty well with Rageblade, so he's typically okay. But yeah, you don't want to put him with something like a Misfortune. That's awful because a lot of times Misfortune wants to ult. If you have to eat her out of her ult, she's obviously losing a ton of damage. Like Misfortune would be a pretty weak pick. Ezreal, Ashe, you know, as AD carries that just aren't going to do as much sustained damage as some of these heavy hitters. You really don't want to pair them together with Tahm Kench as much as possible. So this is why I say it's really important to have visibility for Tahm Kench. You know, if you're going to pick him, you want to pick him like 4th or 5th pick, or like have a good idea about at least 3 of the enemy picks, right? So they need to have some kind of crowd control on their team. You can see they're lining up for a crowd controlled team. You know, like they have a Leona and a Malzahar or something like that. That's looking good. Then you also need to make sure it's like, okay, we already have Jinx locked in. Okay, we're good to go. But if you see that Ezreal lock in, you should really heavily question whether you should play that game at all right now if it's platinum and over, but certainly whether or not you should play Tahm Kench there. So he is very, very strong situationally, so I would not recommend him once again as a blind pick in this meta. He's not necessarily going to lose lane hard in the sense that he's going to die a lot in lane. He's probably going to go even with most lanes. It's just the scaling late game against certain kinds of AD carries can be problematic with him. And, you know, you're better off taking a higher scaling champion if they don't have a lot of crowd control. Unless you are pretty confident that you're really going to be able to leverage his ult, like if you're duo queued with a jungler or a mid lane and you're just going to camp the crap out of bottom with his ult, then that could be an option. So, anyways, well, I guess I kept it to an hour. I didn't do 30 minutes, but at least I kept it to about an hour. So, I guess we'll take it. We'll take it. All right, so that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Once again, special thanks to Joseph for the generous donation. If you would like to commission a guide, just email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com. I'm happy to talk to you about that. It's $25 for a guide right now. I will say I have a lot of them in queue, so it's going to be a little bit currently until I catch up with that. So it might be like a week or so before I can get it out. I do a lot of research. I type up the Google Doc. You know, I try to make really high quality guides. So that is backed up right now. I should be able to, you know, hopefully make some headway on that over the next week or so. But if you're just curious about, you want to know what the timeline would be, you can just email me and I'm happy to give you an honest answer about that. And then I'll also do coaching sessions. If you're interested in that, it's just $20. Just I can send me a replay. I have a video that can show you how if you're interested in that. There's also a playlist on the channel. Go ahead and show you the channel real quick too while we're at it here at the end. If you're just watching this video, you never checked out the channel. There are a ton of resources here. So if you want to watch more guides, these are all the guides right here. So I just did Lulu. I've done Zillion, Taric, Shin, Rakan. I've got a lot more coming out soon. Coaching sessions. I've done 103 over about the last year and a half or so, year and a half. So I do quite a few of these if you want to set that up. Now, these I can do pretty quickly. It doesn't require as much prep. So usually within like a couple of days, I can get the coaching sessions done. And there's lots of topical guides too, and you can commission these as well if you're curious about different topics. So, you know, I have like a best one trick, a split pushing guide, a scaling explanation guide, top 5 champs for each role. You know, I do one of those every patch. In-depth laning guide, enchanter itemization guide, macro guide, micro guide. What is luck in solo queue? Is there such a thing as luck? So there are lots and lots of different guides. I do in-depth patch notes, tier lists, every patch, especially for the support role, but I give you a top 5 for each role as well. If you want me to play one of your favorite champions, it's just a $10 donation. I'm more than happy to make a video about it. I like doing those on stream, but I can do them off stream in certain circumstances too. So if you really want to see me play Volibear support, for example, I can do that for you. I have a lot of these that I'm going to release as well that I have backlogged. But yeah, that's kind of a fun way to do it. People have had me on stream sing karaoke. I'm terrible at singing, but people get a kick out of it and have fun. I'll sing any song you want for $10 on stream karaoke. And yeah, so if you want to support the channel, there are a lot of different ways to do it. And there's a lot of resources on the channel as well. If you want to watch individual champion gameplay, I have like 36 Zyra videos here. You know, 14 Soraka, 14 Rakan, 76 Janna, 63 Tahm Kench. So if you want to watch a lot of Tahm Kench, I've got that for you. Now, there's not a ton from Season 8. I played him a lot in Season 7, but there are a few from Season 8 on there, and I'm going to be adding more onto that soon. But anyways, yeah, lots of resources. Be sure to check it out on the channel. If you want to support, you know, just email me, let me know. And that's going to be it. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.